I would like to introduce to you this morning for our keynote, Steve Frayser, Executive Director of Star Park and the Co-Director of MARC at Texas State University.
Thank you. We spent yesterday talking about a vision for Texas State University to become a leader in innovation through mutually beneficial collaborations with industry, government, research institutions, and the communities. It's that emphasis on interaction with industry and business that makes our approach unique. But I'm also reminded of an old truth that's been out there for a long time, and that is a vision without action is only rhetoric. So what we're going to talk about today is what is Texas State actually doing to enable that vision to become reality. First was a very public commitment by the university to creating something called a research park. A research park is a unique place that is specifically dedicated for the interaction of the university with the private sector and outside players. It's a place physically where those things occur for that connection, but it's much more than that. It's a set of relationships and policies and commitments that allow you to move forward. And what we're doing at Star Park is creating that vision as a reality on the ground, where we're doing specific developments that allow us to work with the private sector and others to bring things forward to commercialization. Star Park today is the only functioning research park affiliated with the university in the state of Texas. And it's a model that's worked well elsewhere, and it provides a commitment by the university that's really public. Once you start building buildings, and once you start dedicating ground, it's kind of hard to back away from that commitment. And so it's something that every day people can drive by and look at and say, yes, that can happen here, and yes, the university is doing these things with partnerships. Our 58 acres is only the beginning. There is a very good conversation going on now that says creating Star Park as the physical test bed for doing collaborative research is not enough. We have other pieces of property as well that we are now talking about as underutilized assets. We have, if you add them all up, about 5,100 acres. Freeman Center, Mueller Farm, which most of you probably don't know we have. It's about 160 acres due east of the Outlet Mall. The Alert Center and the Round Rock campuses. And so we're beginning to develop plans that say, rather than having that just be vacant ground, let's begin to figure out how we can get highest and best use, which supports and grows the research enterprise and allows us to work with the private sector to bring things to market. Upon build out at Star Park, those 58 acres, we anticipate we'll end up with about 650,000 square feet of research, office, testing, engineering, and pilot production. With the completion of the IRL, we'll be at about 25% of that total in place. So we're actually executing that. Those 650,000 square feet will represent about 2,500 employees and an investment of about $250 million. So at that point, if I can get you to pull up the slide, which you've already done, thank you. Let me give you a real quick orientation. If you take a look at this slide, at the bottom of that is something called McCarty Lane. That's the street that runs in front of this hotel. If you were to head west about 1.5 miles, you'd be at the research park. And Hunter Road is the other large arterial that sits next to our property. What you're seeing on that slide represents only about 30 of the 58 acres, and then we have an additional 40 acres we can bring online as we develop this initial front part. The anchor of that park is the building that's labeled as Star One. Star One is a technology business incubator that is today the largest lab-based incubator in the state of Texas. We built it specifically to support the development of life science, material science, and chemistry companies so that they can develop tangible products and take them to market. If you look at what's happened in that building, the companies that are there are supporting our research activities at the university. They're hiring our graduates. And through experiential learning from paid internships and student worker positions, we're giving students an opportunity to look at career opportunities that might not occur to them otherwise, being able to get engaged with an early stage company and make a material commitment to that company to help it grow and then actually become a part of the ownership structure. I'd encourage any of you who can to come over at 4:30 tomorrow. We're going to do a tour of Star One and show you what it is we've actually built and talk a bit about the kinds of things that are going on with those companies. To date, Texas State University, out of its own funds, have committed about $50 million to the enabling of that vision that we have. That's a significant commitment on the part of a public university. What we're going to do now is give you a quick overview of what's going on and should be executed, either completed or underway by the end of 2022. The first of those is IRL, which is in the upper left-hand corner, Infrastructure Research Lab. That is to support our civil engineering, mechanical engineering, and computer science programs in particular, but then also be applicable to other activities. It's under construction right now. The ground is being prepared. We did our official groundbreaking yesterday afternoon, 3:30. That was a bit of fortuitous planning. Why would you not do a groundbreaking in the afternoon in August in Texas when it's 106 degrees? But it also shows you the level of commitment we've got. We would show up and wear jackets in that kind of weather. The two new streets that are going in, Pegasus and Rigel, are more than just a pedestrian set of streets going into the park. They're also research test beds. So for example, we are going to be looking at how to incorporate sections of those streets to use alternative building materials so that they can be proven out over time and data can be collected, and it becomes a demonstration to other potential companies who would look at that product and be able to look at it in place and see data over time. We're looking at using alternative materials for the conduits that will go under those streets to provide access to the research network that's being created there. It's also a place where we're going to be deploying the new smart streetlight systems. Streetlight is an understatement of what's actually being offered by Clearworld, but that's what we're doing with the park. It's not just streets, it's not just sewer lines. It is the construction of test beds that allow demonstration of alternative approaches and collection of data over time so that that can speed to market those new activities. The future building that's shown on the far right side is actually a multi-tenant building and represents our new approach to how to take this whole development to market. The three first buildings in the park are all university constructed, owned, and operated. With any luck, those will be the only three university buildings that have a presence in the park. Our business model going forward is to do P3 partnerships. So that future building, that multi-tenant building, is actually going to be designed, constructed, financed, and operated by Signet Development out of Jacksonville, Florida. The university doesn't have $250 million to spend on buildings for private purposes, but we do have the ground and we have the willingness to collaborate. And one of our requirements for folks to be there is you've got to be doing something with Texas State above and beyond a physical presence. So we're leveraging our capabilities with the company's interests and getting them in place on a long-term environment in which they know what's going to be going on around them and build a critical mass over time that becomes an attractor. We have a formal proposal out to an anchor tenant, and if it's accepted at the end of this month, September, we should be able to break ground in June of next year on a two-story, 60,000 square foot building that will be worth a minimum of about $24 million in private sector investment. And that will open a whole new set of opportunities for us. In addition to the anchor tenant, the university is committed to building out about 15,000 square feet, which will be an advanced prototyping lab that will support companies, and space for us to do design thinking and startup activities with folks who are outside of the wet lab realm. And that will leave us about 6,000 square feet of spec space that we can use to attract additional companies to come into the area and work with us. Parking seems like a really pedestrian and really kind of boring subject, but in reality, it drives what happens with what you're doing with your physical development. The University of Utah is a very large research park that has been around for about 50 years. And they just reprogrammed their park and discovered 30% of their total land area is taken up in surface parking. That's a problem. That's an asset that's underutilized, but also creates in these big seas of asphalt barriers for communication and interaction between folks. There are plenty of studies out there that say that if you're not within a 5-minute walk of one another, you might as well be across the country. And so we are committed to retaining ownership of all the parking lots. When we get a sufficient amount of users out in the park, we'll tear those lots out and replace them with centralized parking structures that can also be the home to autonomous electric shuttles that provide connectivity within the park. Drone pad. We are really looking at how we can enable the deployment of new drone technologies. It'll be in that last mile delivery, it will be in surveillance activities, and it'll be in large people moving drones. And the offer we are making to folks like the Air Force is we'll start with a first pad at Star Park, but then we'll also look at opportunities at Freeman, which is roughly 12 miles away, potentially the Alert Center, which is near the airport, and then eventually the Round Rock campus, so that people will be able to operate between the systems that we create for them and prove out the technologies that they're trying to deploy in autonomous drones. The housing project is one that is near and dear to our hearts. If you haven't noticed, you've been kind of asleep, housing costs are not going down, and they're becoming a major impediment to the provision of workforce to companies. And so we are collaborating with the City of San Marcos, some private nonprofit foundations, the Austin chapter of Habitat for Humanities in the university, to put together a competition where we will ask folks to come forward to us with a design for a 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house for $100,000. And we will pick 3 of those, fund them, put them in place, and then those building samples, models, will become a research test bed for the university, where follow-on, we will do things like looking at building systems management, energy production, energy storage, gray water harvesting, and we'll also look at other things that aren't strictly, from an engineering standpoint, critical issues. The McCoy School, for example, has committed to creating a total cost of ownership model that's transportable. We're providing the ground at no cost. We are providing the site development and committed about $600,000 to do that. We will do the permitting. Those all become variables, and as you take these models out and you take them to different cities, those variables change. And so what McCoy School is going to do for us is to create an input-output that says, here's what the cost is with conventional financing for the house itself. Now, the variables you need to control for in each location are what's the cost of property, what's the impact of fees and permit services from the community, what are the costs typically within that community of utility ownership costs, and be able to look at how close can we stay to an affordable housing solution with those additional variables added in. But the key here is to break the code on how do you create that 1,000 square foot house that's livable. The other things we know we have to look at is we're going to build these things. Community's first reaction, or a neighborhood's first reaction to affordable housing is not in my backyard. So we are going to sponsor educational opportunities to bring folks in to say, this is what we're talking about. Here's what you can visualize will be occurring. And we're going to do things like design sprints to take a look at what are the overall sets of impacts on how you do design, how do you build these, how do you create a sense of community around them so it doesn't have that stigma of being that public housing that's over there. This is a private sector solution to be able to provide workforce housing. And finally, what's not visible here is the deployment of a separate private research network. Through a partnership with Rhetoric and Element 8, we will be, by the end of this year, deploying a 5G research network within Star Park We also have the ability under our FCC license to deploy that as well on the main campus here in San Marcos, at Round Rock, at the Alert Center, and at the Freeman Center. So it really opens some opportunities for us to be able to do things that are experimental in terms of network operations and software development and data collection and data security that you couldn't do with an operating network that has to support an institution like Texas State. So that's, we had our meeting this week, and we will be launching that in the next month or so and should have it fully in place prior to the end of this calendar year. So what I would say to you is, we understand that a vision is a wonderful thing and you can't make any progress unless you have one. But if you don't do those actions that execute it, it's just simply rhetoric. And we're committed to it. We're into it for about 50 million at this point. We're going to be doing more as time goes along. And what I would invite you to do is come back to next year's Digital 360 and come over and see physically the changes that have happened in the park and how we're actually getting this thing moved forward through collaboration and partnerships, not just by the university itself. So thank you very much.